Welcome back. Now that we have the ability to pick up a sword and swing it, we're just dying to make this sword do some damage. But it's quite silent, and usually when you swing a sword, you hear a sort of whooshing sound. And we haven't really added any sound to our project yet. And that's what we're going to do in this video. Now, in order to play a sound when we swing the sword, we need that whooshing sound. So you're going to go to the GitHub page for this course. And there's a downloads folder with a sounds subfolder. And in that sounds subfolder, we have this whoosh.wave. Now, you're going to click on that, and in the whoosh.wave page, you're going to click download. And now this sound wave should be in your sound folder. So once you have that sound wave, you can actually double-click it to play it and hear what it sounds like. And we'd like to get this into Unreal Engine. I'm going to go ahead and rename it to simply whoosh.wave. And before I import it straight into my project, I'm going to go into my assets folder here where I have Mixamo, and I'm going to make a new folder called sounds. And I'll bring that wave file straight into my sounds folder so I know where it is. Now back in my project, I can import this sound folder. So in my content folder here, I'd like to make a new folder called audio. And this is where I'm going to import that sound wave. So I can click import and find my assets folder. And in sounds, there's whoosh.wave. I can click open, and I now have this sound wave asset. I can even press the play button here and hear it from here in the editor. So now that we have a sound, let's go about learning how we can play this when we swing our sword. Now, there are multiple ways to do this. I'm going to show you the old way that it was done in Unreal Engine 4, and then I'll show you the new and improved way that we can do this in Unreal Engine 5. So to play a sound during one of our animations, we can use Anim Notifies. Let's go into Blueprints, Characters, Animations, and take a look at one of our attack animations, such as Standing Melee 360. Now I'd like to play this whoosh sound right about here when we're swinging the sword. And we know about notifies. If we right-click on the one bar here, we can add a notify. We can either create a new notify or select one of the notifies we've already created. But there are special types of notifies. Those are these down here below the search bar. One of those is play sound. If we select that, we now have a play sound notify. And if we click on it, we suddenly see some options in the details panel, including this variable called sound. Now, if we click the drop-down, we'll see all the sounds in our project, and we can search for whoosh and see that sound wave asset there. And we can click on it. And now every time we play this animation, we'll hear the sound. And I can hear that the sound was played a little early, so I can move it back a little bit. So once I have it positioned correctly, I now have a sound that'll play along with this particular animation. And I can add these to my other attack animations if I like. And if I go into the game, grab a weapon, and attack, well, I didn't add a notify to that attack animation, but as soon as I play that attack where she swings 360 degrees, I will hear that sound notify. So let's see if I can get it to play. There it is. And that sounds great. Now, adding a sound notify to one of our animation assets is possible, as we can see, but we also know that we can add notifies to montages, and I'd like to add this animation to the montage itself. So I'm going to click on this whoosh and delete it, and close this animation, and instead open my attack montage. Now here we have that notifies bar with one here for my attack end anim notify. I'd like to add my play sound notify in here, and that way the notify is tied to my montage and not the animation. You could really do it either way, and there's nothing wrong with putting the sound notify in the animation itself. And we're going to see that we'll have some sound notifies in some of our animation assets, like our running and jumping animations. But for attacking, I'm going to keep it here in the montage itself. Now this track is labeled 1, and we can add more notifies to this same track here. We can go to Add Notify, select Play Sound, click on it, and search for whoosh, and add that here. And now if we play this, we get that sound. But if we add enough notifies, they're going to start jumbling on top of each other. And for that reason, we have the ability to add multiple tracks here. I can click the drop-down that says Track and select Add Notify Track. And by default, this next notify track is called 2, but I can rename it. I can call it Whoosh. And I can move my Play Sound Notify down into the Whoosh track. And that sounds great. I can even right-click on this Play Sound Notify, copy it, and move my scrubber over to the next animation, and right-click, and paste. And now it exists in Attack 2 as well. And I can position it so that it sounds right. Now this is all great, but we're playing the sound wave directly. So that means if we want to change the pitch or the volume or alter the sound in some way, we have to alter the sound wave asset itself. I can browse to it, double-click on it, and here are some properties. By default, its volume is set to 1. It's basically normalized. If I set this to 2, it'll be twice as loud. Same goes for the pitch. But in general, we're not going to want to alter the sound wave itself. What happens if we want to use this sound wave in some other animation, and we want the pitch to be different in that animation versus this one? If we change the sound wave itself, then both animations will be affected. So for that reason, Unreal Engine created an asset known as a sound cue. Let's see how we can make one. Now, right here in my audio folder, I can right-click, go to Sounds, and select Sound Cue. And I can call this SC for Sound Cue _ Whoosh. And I can double-click this, and I suddenly have a sound cue editor. It has a graph, we can add nodes to it, and it has this output node with a speaker on it. Whatever goes into this output node, that's what gets played when the sound cue is played. I'm going to dock the tab at the top. Now I'd like to get my sound wave in here. So from my content drawer, I can click and drag my Whoosh sound wave up to the SC Whoosh tab and drop it right in here. And if I hook this straight up to the output, this sound cue now has a sound wave asset, and we can click Play Cue to hear what it sounds like. And if we select the output node, we can see some parameters here. So if we created multiple sound cues, we could change their volume and pitch and other properties individually per cue, and then play those cues instead of playing the sound waves directly. So if I go to my attack montage and select my Play Sound Notify, now I can open the drop-down for sound and search for SC _ Whoosh and choose that instead. And I can do this for my other Play Sound Notify as well. Search for SC Whoosh and play it. Now if I go into my sound cue and change the pitch to, say, 2, I can hear what it sounds like, much higher. And if I go to my montage and play, I hear that sound cue with the higher pitch. Now, it doesn't sound that great to me, so I'm going to leave it at 1. And this is the typical way that we got sounds into our animations in Unreal Engine 4. But Unreal Engine 5 introduces a new type of asset called a meta sound. And meta sounds are superior to sound cues in a number of ways. Now here's the documentation for the sound cue editor. It talks about how you can have multiple sounds and randomize them and change their properties, and this is a great skill to have. So I'll have this link in the resources for this video. Now here's the documentation for meta sounds, and this article explains all the new features of meta sounds. Whereas sound cues allowed us to randomize sounds, change their pitch and volume, and add other effects, meta sounds allow us to do all those things as well, except they're more procedural. They can take input data, just like functions can, and change those sounds dynamically. They render their sounds in parallel with each other, so they're more optimized. And they have something called sample accurate control of audio. Sample accuracy is the ability for timing to be on the order of a single sample of audio. You see, audio is sampled at extremely high rates, like 48,000 samples per second. And a sample accurate event would have a timing resolution of this breathtaking rate. For example, if a sound has a sample rate of 48,000 samples per second, then we're talking about 1/48,000th of a second. This means that these metasounds can do things to your sound at a very high degree of timing accuracy. Metasounds can trigger events very quickly, and this is important for sounds because without this degree of resolution, you can get audible hitches and sound interruptions. So for you sound engineers out there, this is great news for you. And if you're not so sound savvy, this just means that metasounds are highly improved over sound cues. This article explains how they increase performance, as well as how they're very modular. You can create a metasound and use it as a node in another metasounds graph. So it's a good idea to understand how to create and use metasounds as well as sound cues. So while we created our sound cue for the whoosh sound, which is great, I'd like to create a metasound instead and see how we can tamper with our whoosh sound and make it a little more procedural, maybe randomize its pitch and its volume a bit. So I'm going to close my sound cue and close my attack montage for now, and I'd like to make a metasound. Now to do this, I have to enable the Metasounds plugin. So I can go to Edit and Plugins and search here for Metasound, and here's the Metasound plugin. Now it is in the beta, and if we click the checkbox, we'll be warned that Epic recommends using caution when shipping projects with beta plugins. So this is a very new feature. I'm going to click Yes, and I'm informed at the bottom of the plugin window that I need to restart for this change to take effect. So I'm going to click Restart Now, and I'll be prompted to save my progress, so I'll click Save Selected. And now that Unreal Engine is loaded back up, I'm going to go ahead and close the plugin editor window, and I'm ready to make a metasound. So opening my content drawer in my audio folder, I'm going to right-click and make a new folder for my metasounds, and I'll call it Metasounds. And here in Metasounds, I can make a new metasound by right-clicking, going to Sounds, and selecting Metasound Source. Now, metasounds are typically prefixed with SFX. So I'm going to call this SFX Whoosh, and double-click it to open it up. And this looks similar to the sound cue editor, with a few key differences. We have input and we have a couple of outputs, just like a function would. Now, input is sort of like an input execution pin in a blueprint function. Whenever we play a metasound, the flow of execution begins from the input and finishes in this output pin that has on finished. Now, there's another output pin, and if we hover over it, it says the resulting mono output from the source. So this is the sound that's being played in this metasound. And mono just means that the sound is playing through both the left and right speakers. Now, just like functions, a metasound can take inputs, and we'd like to add an input for the wave asset to play. So we're going to click plus input, and we can rename this input. I'm going to call it whoosh. And down here in the details panel, we see that this input has a data type. And if I click the dropdown and search for wave, I can choose wave asset. So now I have an input of type wave asset, and I can click my whoosh input, drag it down onto the graph, and I see that it has a blue pin. Now we have to actually play this wave asset, and we can do this using nodes. To play a wave, we can use a wave player node. So we'll right-click and search for that and select it. And wave player has an input called play. So I can hold Alt and click on the on-play input to break that execution wire, because we don't want it to go straight to the output and finish this metasound immediately. We want to run it through the wave player first. So I'm going to connect it to the play input. And wave player takes a wave asset. That's the data type of our whoosh input. We're going to plug that straight into wave asset. Now, start time allows us to choose a time in the sound wave to start playing. 0 plays it from the beginning. Pitch shift allows us to shift the pitch. There's a checkbox for loop, but we don't want to loop the sound, so loop start and loop duration can be left at 0 and -1 respectively. -1 just means it'll loop the whole wave asset. Otherwise, we could choose a loop duration, but we're not going to loop this, as loop is unchecked. Now, onPlay will be executed when the wave gets played. So we're going to take onPlay and hook it up to onFinished. But we do need to specify the sound that we're playing with our second output. And WavePlayer has an out left and an out right. But for mono sounds, which play sounds both in the left and right speakers, we can use either one of these. So we can hook on left straight in to the out mono. And if we save this, we now have a meta sound. Now our input called whoosh can have a default value. Down here in the details panel, under default value, we see default. And we can open this dropdown and select a sound wave. I'm going to search for whoosh and select that. And now if I press play, I actually don't hear anything because onPlay is hooked straight up to onFinished. I actually need to hook up onFinished to onFinished. That way we'll get to play the sound, and once it's done playing, we'll finish the meta sound. So if I hit play, we can hear it play. And the cool thing is we have this soundbar at the right, and it's showing us the volume of the sound. And this actually works in real time. So we can look at this while we're playing the game as well. Now we have a basic meta sound, playing the sound. But the cool thing is we can make this a bit more procedural by giving some randomness to the pitch and even the volume as well. So let's randomize our pitch a little bit. I can take my onPlay from the input and drag off of it and search for random float and choose the random float function. Now random float takes a seed. A seed is a value passed into a random number generator determining the output. And we can have a random minimum and maximum. And the output is the random value. And I'm going to plug that straight in to pitch shift. So now we're going to randomize the pitch between 0 and 1. And if I press play several times, it's played at a random pitch between 0 and 1. And we can really see the effect of this by creating a larger random range here. For example, if my min is -10 and my max is 10, then when I press play several times, we can really see a randomness there. I'd like to keep the range a bit smaller than that. I'd like to go from 0 to 1, and I think that's a pretty good randomized range. Now we can randomize the volume as well by simply multiplying our out left by a float. So if I drag off of this and make an asterisk, I can multiply audio by float. And we can get another random by dragging off of our input, getting a random float, and hooking this value up to the multiply and taking the result of that and hooking that up to the output. Now randomizing the volume between minimum and maximum, gives us a little bit of variation there for the volume. And that way it doesn't sound like the same audio clip being played over and over. It's almost like we have lots of different sound waves that are similar, so this gives us a bit of replayability. So now that we have a new meta sound, we can use this in our attack montage. So I'm going to go back to Blueprints, Characters, Animations, and open my attack montage. And now I can select my play sound notify and search for SFX_whoosh and choose that. And I'll go ahead and choose it for both of these. SFX whoosh. And now I can play this and see how it sounds. And that sounds great. And I can even play test in the game now. So let's grab a weapon and attack. And as we attack multiple times, we hear the variations in sound. That one was pretty quiet. So that's how we can create meta sounds and use them in our animations and anim montages with play sound notifies. So before we wrap this up, I'd like to make another meta sound. And I'm going to open my ancient content, which has its own audio folder. And in the sound waves folder, we have echo, and echo contains a Foley folder. This has all sorts of footstep type sounds. But going back out to echo, we have this Vox folder, and this has sounds of Echo's voice, sort of exerting herself. And we can make a meta sound using these and randomize them. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So closing ancient content and going back to my audio folder and into meta sounds, I'm going to right click, go to sounds, and make a new meta sound and call this one sfx_exert. And this will be Echo's voice exerting herself when doing something like an attack. So we can double click this, and in this meta sound, I'd like to do something a little bit different. I'd like to add an input and call this input exert and change its type to wave asset, only this time, notice there's a checkbox next to the type that says is array. I'm going to check that, and notice the default value down here says 0 array elements, which means we can have an input of this array type, and we can choose multiple sound wave assets. So I'm going to click plus, open the dropdown, and search for VOX. And we have a number of these sound assets, 10 to be exact. So I'm going to choose the first one, but I'd like to add all 10. So I'm going to click plus 9 more times. And for the rest of these 9 array elements, I'm going to choose the other 9 voice sound effects, starting with 2 and moving my way down the list to get all 10. So now that I have an array with all 10 of these sound wave assets, my goal here is to play one of them at random every time this meta sound gets played. So here's how I can do that. I can take my exert input, drag it out, and notice that this pin is no longer a blue circle, but a series of squares. This is the array symbol in Unreal Engine. And meta sounds have a node called shuffle. And shuffle will randomize something. It takes an array, and there are several versions here. We can shuffle booleans, floats, integers, strings, but I'd like to shuffle wave assets. So I'm going to choose the wave asset array shuffle node. And notice its input has that same array symbol. So I can hook up my exert array right into the input. And the input to my meta sound can go straight to the next input pin for shuffle. And notice that the shuffle node outputs a value, which is a sound wave. We can drag off of this and get a wave player node. And after the shuffle, we'll use on next to go straight to play from the wave player. And from the wave player, we'll take on finished and hook it up to our on finished pin in the output node. And we can take our out left and plug it into the output. And now we have a meta sound that will shuffle all of these different wave assets in the input and play one at random. So if we press play, we get randomized exertion sounds. And just like our other meta sounds, we can add a bit of randomness to the pitch as well by dragging off of the input, getting a random float node, and hooking this into pitch shift. And we'll modularize this, and we can make the min, say, -1, and leave the max at +1, and we'll get some of these waves played with a lower pitch, and some with a higher pitch. And we can also randomize the volume like we did before by getting another random float and multiplying out left by a float. We'll use asterisk, multiply audio by float, and hook that up, and this will go to the out mono. So now we've randomized the volume as well. So now that we have an exert meta sound, we can play this during our attack animation as well. And I'd like to play it right at the point where it looks like she's hitting something. Now, to avoid having my notifies jumbled up, I can click the track dropdown, add a notify track, and call this exert. And right here, I'm going to add a notify, selecting Play Sound, and notice that it's automatically set to SFX Exert. And that's because if I Control Space to bring up the content drawer, I have SFX Exert selected. So simply adding a Play Sound Notify, while I already have a sound asset like a Metasound selected, I don't have to set that sound variable. It'll automatically be set for me. So I can go to my Attack 2 section and add a sound notify here in my Exert track. So add notify, play sound, and there it is. And now I just need to play these montage sections and make sure it sounds right. Now the whoosh is kind of masking the exert sound, so I can randomize the float with some bigger numbers, such as a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 2. Now let's see how this sounds. And that sounds better. And we can also test this in game. And I think that sounds great. So now we know how to make meta sounds, and these are superior to sound cues. So it's good to know how to do it both ways. But meta sounds give us more capabilities, it's more optimized, higher performance, and it's the new way of doing things in Unreal Engine. In the next video, we'll make some more meta sounds that we can add to our locomotion animations so we can have footstep sounds and jump sounds. Great job. I'll see you soon.